The artist we're learning about today is Frida Kahlo. This painting is called Two Fridas. Please make sure that that is in quotation marks. The medium for this piece is an oil painting. The elements that are most important for this piece are color and shape. The wedding dress on the left side symbolizes vulnerability and naivete. On the right, we have these very vibrant but muted colors. And then, of course, we have the background where that sky is really dark and moody. The space is very large in this piece. We have our two Fridas sitting in the front, and there's what looks like a very large expanse behind them, a very large area, and then this very big open sky above them. So there's a very clear foreground and background. The principles that are most important for this piece are contrast and balance. The contrast from left to right is very important. We mentioned before the color difference. There's this, very bright white, pure wedding dress on the left and very colorful dress on the right. For balance, if we took some scissors and cut this piece straight down the middle here, then it's pretty evenly balanced on both sides. Both Fridas take up about the same amount of space. They're the same size on this painting, and it's fairly evenly balanced, not perfectly symmetrical because we don't have an exact mirror on one side or the other, but their bodies are fairly mirrored for one another, so it is very evenly balanced. The mood of this piece is melancholy or sad. Especially we have, like I mentioned before, those dark, moody clouds in the background. The facial expressions of both of our Fridas are very stoic. And of course, we have these exposed hearts too, which also the heart represents love and passion. And because they are exposed, we kind of are wondering what's going on here with these two Fridas. The genre of this painting is surrealism or magical realism. You can put either of those. Surrealism means that it's otherworldly. Magical realism is based in real life, but with magical otherworldly elements layered in. So it's very closely related to surrealism, but they're not exactly interchangeable. In this painting, the Frida on the left is her at the time that she married her husband, Diego Rivera. She was young and naive. The white in her dress symbolizes purity and naivete. The Frida on the right is her at the time when she painted this piece. Their two hearts are connected by one vein, but the heart on the left is cut open, showing vulnerability. There's also a bird cage made from the veins of the Frida on the left. So if you see here coming down, her hand is holding some medical clamp, and her veins are creating this very delicate bird cage that's hanging by her legs. This bird cage symbolizes that her marriage is a cage for her. She's trapped inside of it. And the clothing of the Frida on the right is colored but muted, showing that she's learned and has experienced more and is less naive. She sees the world as it is. The broken, cut open heart on the left, of course, shows pain, and on the right she has a heart that, if you look closely, you can see that it is stitched closed. So there's been some healing, and there's definitely strength through that healing. One thing that's so beautiful in the meaning of this piece is that her current self at the time, the Frida on the right, is holding the hand of her past self, the Frida on the left. And she has this strength and this knowledge, and she's trying to give that comfort and that strength to her past self to help her through this hardship and pain that she's going through. Frida Kahlo is a Mexican painter, and she was born in Mexico City. She was born in 1907 and died in 1954. She was only 47 years old when she died. When she was 18, she was in a terrible bus accident. She broke multiple ribs, her collarbone, her legs, and her pelvis. An iron rail impaled her hip, and she was in a cast for a long time and had to wear a plaster corset during her 3-month recovery. During this time is when she really took up painting. She originally had wanted to be a doctor, but the accident changed this. She did consider being a medical illustrator, which would combine her two passions of science and art, but eventually she went with just being an artist. This piece on the left here is one that she did while she was in the hospital. The title is very clear that it was not a good time in her life. The wooden frame that's above her bed right here is actually a frame that was created so that she could paint while laying down. So this was her easel. And you can see that instead of a painting propped up to it, there is a funnel, and all sorts of these really gross, disgusting things are being put into the funnel and forced fed to her. Definitely, whenever she was in the hospital, there was a lot of suffering and pain that she was going through, and it certainly is understandable that when someone is in that situation and it's very hard to see an end in sight of recovery, that that suffering can certainly seem like it just is going on for a very, very long time. And like I mentioned before, she was in the hospital and in recovery for 3 months. So that's a very, very long time to be confined to a bed. So she was very upset and miserable. And this piece here is showing her dealing with that pain and that hurt and feeling as though she was only being kept alive for that pain and suffering by being force fed and taken care of. The piece on the right, The Wounded Deer, we have Frida herself is embodied and represented by this deer, and we know this very clearly because the deer has Frida's face instead of a deer's face. And deer are, of course, animals that are hunted. We see that this deer has been hunted and shot with multiple arrows. And here again, we see Frida portraying herself as a very vulnerable person, as someone that has been hunted, that feels as though others have harmed her. And this especially goes hand in hand with the marriage that she had with Diego Rivera. They had a very volatile and tumultuous marriage. They were divorced and remarried later. And Diego was a womanizer. She constantly had to fight for his affection. And, these paintings that she's done throughout the time in her life when she was married with him show that pain through her marriage as well. So she went through a very traumatic physical pain when she was a child, and then later even more emotional pain through her marriage. Most of Frida's pieces are self-portraits or include herself in them, especially whenever she was in the hospital. If you think about it, she's, laying in a hospital bed. There's not much around her to have as a subject. So she was the most readily available thing. There definitely is a tradition of artists doing multiple self-portraits, in part because it's much easier to paint yourself than try to convince someone to sit for a portrait. Here on the left, self-portrait with thorn necklace and hummingbird, we see again that she has this very stoic and unemotional look on her face. The animals around her are actually some of her pets. She kept many different kinds of pets because she was unable to have children. So they were stand-in children for her. We can see, if you look carefully, that the thorns on her necklace are cutting her neck and she's bleeding. So this shows a very clear visual of this pain and emotional turmoil that she was going through her whole life. Of course, you also have the connection there to the crown of thorns that Jesus wore in pictures and stories from the Bible. The piece on the right, Self-Portrait as a Tijuana, is a traditional outfit. Many of her pieces, she's wearing these traditional clothes of Mexico, where she's from. She always wanted to celebrate her culture. And especially she and Diego moved to America for a little while, particularly later in their lives, and she really, really missed home. So she would wear all of these traditional clothes, and that would be the piece of Mexico that she brought with her and what gave her comfort in this strange land that she wasn't used to. However, in this piece, you can see that on her forehead, she literally has painted a portrait of her husband, Diego Rivera, and we say the phrase, something's on your mind. And she definitely was constantly thinking about her husband and loved him her whole life, even whenever things were bad. She just, really had this connection with him that she couldn't shake.